Good evening, and welcome back to the Weird and the Wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. And of course, we are here today to carry on with our examination of the supernatural and paranormal as we go around the world looking at different cultures and countries to see if we can find interesting things. And surprisingly, with all the goings around that we have been doing, we have actually almost come to the very end of the doings of ghosts. So, welcome to you all. I do hope you're enjoying the chats in the channel, and I hope that you're finding it fun. So, welcome to you. Remember, we are going to just touch on a couple of housekeeping rules, which is to say we only have one rule, and that is be polite. As long as you are polite, we are good by that. If you are not polite, we will give you the boot. And I am tucked up in my blanket and hood, as you can imagine, and I have my hot water cat snuggled up on my lap, ready for the live. Though I doubt she will stick her head out because she is far too happy purring away there. But I am going to welcome you all and say, please like, subscribe, share, do all of the good things, and give lots of gifts so we can keep this channel going. It is fantastic to have you alongside us. It is wonderful that you are here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And I hope it's going to be a good one. As you know, as we do this, we have been going around different cultures and countries around the world, bouncing from continent to continent to see what we can find. And tonight we have the topic of the interesting things that can be found in California, of all places, which I think is going to be a good one. California, the laid-back capital of the world. And what do we know about California anyway? Well, there are varying things that we know and that we can say. So let's see what we can find as we go. Now, to give us a little bit of an understanding just about where we are and what we are doing. California is in the far western United States on the Pacific Ocean. It borders on Oregon to the north, Nevada and Arizona to the east. It is supposedly, and I must admit I never knew to ask these questions, but there you go. It is the home of wetsuits, Barbie dolls, and fortune cookies. And apparently, according to my research, quite a lot of ghosts. Interestingly, they have 100,000 earthquakes each year, which doesn't inspire me to want to live there. I don't know about you guys, but it's a little too many for my liking. There are more people that live in California than live in Alaska. And who would have thought to that? And it is home to the world's largest tree. Do we care? I don't know. Maybe that's important. Nevertheless, welcome to you all, and as I say, our interest is the supernatural and paranormal. So let's see what California has to offer us, to interest, to excite, and very possibly, if we are lucky, maybe even to terrify. So we have hope. There is the possibility of all of this and more, and I think that we shall enjoy it. So welcome to all of you who have joined in, and I hope that you will enjoy this. So let's begin. California. Quite a few ghostly legends and quite a few places, in fact, that fit very much to what we would expect for places that you might get suitable ghosts. There is, of course, the famous Alcatraz, the great prison that's supposed to have been impossible to escape from, though it was, which was interesting in and of itself, but not our topic for now. There is not only that, there is the Bodie Ghost Town, which is quite interesting. The Hotel de Coronado, with a number of interesting ghosts. And of course, there is the famous Winchester House, which is quite an interesting one. And a very weird sort of story behind as well, which shall just add to the amusement. Um, while we might want it to be, it does not, of course, have any connection with good old Sam and Dean, though it would be very appropriate if it was, but rather with the famous Winchester firearm. And it seems there is a rather bizarre connection to that, which we shall indeed explore. But let's see what we actually can talk about. We have a number of things um, that may or may not be of great interest to us. And as we progress along, we even have a ghost ship, which I think is going to be quite promising in that regard. There are a number of typical ones, of course. As we know, one of the most famous ghost kinds that you ever get anywhere, and which we have found in just about every culture and country around the world, regardless, which is quite interesting, is La Llorona. And yes, indeed, we find it yet again in California, which I think is going to be a pretty good one. Of course, going through California is Route 66, and there is so much that can be said about that road alone, because as we are well aware, it is one of the top locations. As we've gone around, we've discovered that if you want ghosts, there are 3 top locations with a fourth one, which joined in purely because, well, it popped up in our research and proved to be the other big place you're likely to get something creepy, um, which I think was very interesting. So, top places, hospitals, of course, expected in a great many ways. Um, any battlefield, be it an open space or a castle or similar, absolutely right there, you are going to get ghosts. Um, and of course, with hospitals, we have to include mental hospitals for that regard. And then the third place was roads. Roads are a fine, fine place for ghosts. But as we go along, um, we discovered that museums are the other place. So let's see what we can find. And we are going to begin as our intro, as it were, um, to California with something in San Francisco. And this is a story told by the late Benson Foley, who says, in the summer of 1881, I met a man, James H. Conway, a resident of Franklin, Tennessee. He was visiting San Fran due for his health, a deluded man, and he brought with me a note of introduction from a Mr. Lawrence Barting, who I had known as a captain in the Union Army in the Civil War. At its close, he had settled in Franklin in time, I had reason to think, become somewhat prominent as a lawyer. Now, the story goes on explaining this relationship, such as it was, to Mr. Conway, who introduced this gentleman who spoke of, well, how can I put this easily? A certain person died and thereafter communicated from the other side beyond the grave in an unmistakable way just how they had left, um, and offered this lawyer the opportunity to decide um, how to deal with Mr. Conway. Now, Mr. Conway explained that things were not the way that anybody expected in regard to this, and a certain argument between them arose. Why an argument? Well, it came up because of an argument that seemed to have occurred along with their mutual acquaintance, Mr. Barting, who he said, now is not my friend, and apparently it's your fault. To which the gentleman responded, well, I've never heard from the man. And Mr. Conway said in great surprise, but he's here. I met him yesterday, 10 minutes before meeting you, and I gave you the greeting that he gave me. And he was distant and polite. But that is all he offered, and so that is all I shall offer you. And I shall simply move right along. Thank you, and good day. Now, of course, this left the gentleman somewhat confused, piqued, perhaps. Much thanks for the like, sir. Welcome, welcome. So, this seemed to be a problem, and he couldn't understand it. But a little later, um, Mr. Conway spoke again with him and was far friendlier. And he said, "It seems incredible, but I supposed I must have mistaken a different man for Barting, because uh, he lacked the gentleman's distinct features after all, and it seems I must have had a completely wrong person." So I said it must have been another man, because indeed there is no way um, it could have been him, for in fact the gentleman of which we speak, Barting, is deceased. Now the man said, "Of course I would have known if it was him, because of his distinctive moustache." However, the gentleman that recounted the story said to him, "The only problem is that I have not only a letter from his widow, but a photograph of the man taken a week before his death without the distinctive moustache." And it seemed that, in fact, the gentleman that they had met was Barting, just not a living one. Well, it seems that the ghosts have been around for quite a long time. So perhaps it promises us a decent selection that we can talk about. Now, of course, we shall begin with Death Valley Junction and the haunted Amargosa Hotel. First called Amargosa, which means bitter water in the Paiute language. It's a tiny town in the Mojave Desert, and even today has very, very few people living there. Much thanks there for the likes, Carol. That's very kind of you and much appreciated. So tiny town that was a borax mining community, a couple of historic buildings, not much more, which include the hotel and opera house, which do still cater to visitors. And according to what we understand, uh, it was mostly only the local natives that lived there, and at a point, there were some prospectors that arrived and settled, but never too many. And it was only in 1907 that they even got a post office. So a very tiny place uh, that then became known as Death Valley Junction. Um, there was a narrow gauge railway that let people come through, but really and truly, it was not much of a place at all. And by and large, it is not much more these days than a tourist. But in 1967, um, a ballet dancer, mime artist, and actress, all of those, all turned up and in one person and visited this tiny town. And of course, this was something of a thing, as you can probably imagine. And her name was Marcia Beckett. And her husband and herself stopped there due to a flat tire. Um, and from an early age, this very talented young lady uh, made a name for herself, and it simply got better. And she appeared in some Broadway musicals and more. Um, and they took to uh, touring, which is how they ended up stopping over in Death Valley. Um, so they went into Death Valley Junction to get the tire repaired, and she went exploring while her husband got the vehicle fixed, and she was enthralled by the old theatre. So she decided that absolutely that was what she wanted, and her first performance in the theatre that she bought thereafter for the princely sum of $45. Can you imagine an entire theatre for $45? Um, she gave her first performance to no more than 12 adults. Now, according to uh, what the research says, um, she died there as well, which was quite sad um, in a great many ways. And this very theatre, opera house, hotel, both, well, yes, um, is haunted by a ghost of a cat, first of all, strange in and of itself. Cats do not generally, or well, animals do not generally become ghosts. So with cats, you never know. They have so many lives. Maybe all cats uh, are partly ghostly, um, which used to interrupt the performances while Marsha was there and alive and doing them. Um, Tom Willett, also, who was a partner of Marsha, has been spied sitting in the chairs during performances that still go on today. In an unrenovated section of the hotel that is known as Spooky Hollow, there are a number of strange happenings that occur there. Apparently, the building was once a dormitory for the miners during the borax days and was used as a hospital and a morgue. In room 24, the guests have repeatedly reported hearing the sounds of a crying child when there are no children in the hotel at all. And they suspect it is the ghost of a young girl who drowned in a bathtub in 1967. Room 32 has a threatening and malevolent presence that chills the visitors. It was once home to a mining boss, and it seems that a hanging took place in the room back in the day. Room 9 is also haunted, and a number of people have reported that while they're sleeping, something holds their legs and feet down. Yet more have heard the doorknob turning, only to open it and find no one there. Sounds of a child giggling and running across the hall have been heard. In the dining room, guests have heard voices of what sounds like a group of people, especially the distinctive high voice of a lady. Other activities include strange noises coming from the walls and shadows that are seen dancing on stage, the sounds of footsteps crossing rooms at night and coming down hallways, the scent of lilacs, and showers that turn on by themselves. According to the reports, guests are often known to pack their bags and abruptly leave in the middle of the night. I don't know. I strongly suspect that if I was there, I might actually want to stick around and see what more I could find. But that's a lot of ghosts for one tiny place. And of course, as we can see, they fit to the paradigm that we know of ghosts and ghostly, the way things um, generally ought to be, such as it is. So that is of no surprise at all. And I think it fair to say that it is exactly the level of things that we would uh, expect. they fit to the way that the different categories of ghosts seem to work, nevertheless. But let's move along a little bit more and let's talk about Alcatraz. Alcatraz is an island with a centuries old history that started way back when with the Native Americans and moved on to Fort Alcatraz, which was a military barracks for a while, and one of the most often known things about it that it was said to be the toughest federal penitentiary in the nation. Candace, welcome. Lovely to have you on board. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. So Alcatraz has absolutely been a while uh, a place of hauntings. However, it is often described also as a portal, possibly to another dimension. It is known as a place filled with the energy of those that came to the rock and never left. Tales and legends of the island have circulated for several centuries since its first visitors. The Native Americans believed the island to be inhabited by evil spirits and therefore should be greatly avoided. We know that as severe punishment for violations of tribal law, sometimes the native Indians would banish the offender to be isolated on the island for a time or even for life to live among the evil spirits and suffer for their sins. Hey there, Kylie. Welcome, welcome. Uh, Today, of course, staff and visitors to Alcatraz um, say they have seen and heard and felt even these spirits that continue to lurk in the shadows. And not just within the prison buildings itself, but all around the island. The sound of men's voices, screams, whistles, the clanging of doors. Hey there, Lily. Welcome, welcome. Glad to see you back. Awesome to have you here there again. Severus Snape. I could be Severus. I'd make a great Severus, except he has better hair than me. So we have many reports. Terrifying screams are said to be heard as well, especially down near the dungeon area. And you know, a dungeon has to be bad if it's the dungeon of a prison. Ah, much thanks for the love, and I do appreciate it greatly. I don't know, would you guys stay in Alcatraz for a night? They say that can be allowed. Give your opinions on that. Um, while the island served as a federal penitentiary, several of the guards reported extraordinary experiences, hearing the sounds of sobbing, moaning, terrible smells, and reports of what they simply referred to as the Thing, an entity that was said to appear with glowing eyes. And of course, we know what glowing eyed creatures do turn up, especially in abandoned places. So we have no doubt that we shall have to discover a little more of what this thing might be. Other reports were made of phantom prisoners, soldiers appearing before the guards and families uh, who lived on the island. So by and large, it seems that there's quite a lot going on that you might not expect. Now, it seems that even the warden, a chap by the name of Johnston, who absolutely did not believe in ghosts at all, once heard a woman sobbing while leading several guests on a prison tour. The cries heard by the warden and the guests were described as coming from inside the dungeon walls, and as the sobbing was heard, an icy wind blew past the group, even though they were indoors. So perhaps, since the 1940s, apparitions have been seen on the site of what is the now burnt out shell of the warden's house. During a Christmas party at Johnston's place, several guards told the story of a ghostly man who appeared suddenly before them, wearing a grey suit, a brimmed cap, and with mutton chop sideburns. At least he was stylish, if outdated. Many thanks for the likes again. You are so kind. I do greatly appreciate it. The startled guard stared at the apparition, and the room suddenly turned terribly cold. The fire in the Ben Franklin stove, which I assume is a kind of stove, suddenly went out. Less than a minute later, though, the spirit vanished. And one wonders who that was. It has been reported that the old lighthouse will suddenly appear on foggy nights, accompanied by an eerie whistling sound and a flashing green light that slowly makes its way around the island, appearing to guards and visitors alike. But the spectacle will then vanish. And this is fascinating because, of course, the old lighthouse is no longer there. When the prison was still open, guards told of hearing phantom cannons and gunshot, accompanied by screams that were so real that they sent the guards to the ground, believing that prisoners had somehow escaped and obtained weapons. After taking cover, the guards would cautiously go and investigate, but there'd be nothing there, and these incidents could never be explained. Very strange indeed. Another often reported experience of the guards was the smell of smoke that came from a deserted laundry room, as if something was on fire. When they investigated, though, the black smoke was so thick it drove the guards from the room, but minutes later, the room was completely smoke free, both to sight or to smell. In the terrifying D block, the prison is said to have been and continues to be the most haunted block in the prison. And while first built the same as the other cell blocks, the Bureau of Prisons appropriated additional money for a more secure D block after the 1939 escape attempt in which Arthur Doc Barker was killed. D block, known as the treatment unit. That's just kind of creepy in and of itself. Was known as a 42 cell block with varying restrictions. There was no contact between D block and GenPop, and all prisoners incarcerated in there were basically isolated. 36 of the cells were like those in the GenPop, but the inmates were not allowed to work or go to the mess hall for meals. They were allowed only one visit to the rec yard and 2 showers each week, and all meals were served in cells. Their only diversion was the reading of the prison approved material, and these cells faced the Golden Gate Bridge, from which cold winds often blew. One guard who worked in D block was known to turn the air conditioning high to make it as cold as possible for those confined there. So they were not well treated and were quite probably rather angry. 5 of the remaining 6 cells were known as strip cells, but we would have referred to them as the hole. Reserved for the most severe offenders of prison rules, they were located at the bottom tier, the coldest place, containing only a sink, a toilet, and a low watt light bulb that the guards could turn off if they felt like it. The mattresses were taken away during the day, and they had no time in the yard, no showers, no reading material, and you could be in the hole as many as 19 days, completely isolated and frustrated. The last strip shell was the Oriental, and that was the most severe of the prison, uh, assuring complete deprivation of all peripheral senses. A dark steel encased cell, no sink, no toilet, just a small hole in the floor. The inmates were placed naked in the cell, given a restricted diet, and confined in pitch black, cold darkness. Now, why am I telling you all of this? And the answer is very simple. We know for a fact that um, merely dying will not, in any manner or form, cause you to become a ghost. No. For a ghost to form, you need a large amount of emotion at your death. Now, of course, it can very possibly be love or loyalty, but that's by and large quite rare. Um, Usually, the things that make ghosts, in terms of the emotion, is either hate or anger. And all of these things that I have been describing are exactly the kind of conditions that would, in fact, make somebody very angry and hateful. Hey there, Dreary. Welcome. Welcome. I hope that you are having a fine evening. So, having looked at these awful punishments that could be said, a former guard who worked the prison in the 1940s reported that guards often saw the presence of a man dressed in the late 1800s prison attire walking the hallway next to the strip cells. On one occasion, when an inmate was locked in the hole, he began to scream that someone with glowing eyes is in here with me. Well, the 19th century spectral prisoner had become so much of a practical joke among the guards that when the convicts' cries of, "I'm being attacked," came, they were ignored. The screams continued, though, well into the night when they stopped. When the guards inspected the cell in the morning, the convict was found dead, and there were noticeable handprints around his throat. Autopsies proved that the strangulation was not self-inflicted, and in fact, it seemed that besides being strangled to death, there's a reasonable chance that even before he could die of the strangulation, he might have died of terror. What was in there with him? And how did it go so far as to kill him? At the time, many believed the inmate was strangled by a guard who had had enough of the inmates screaming, and a heavy duty investigation was made, but no evidence was ever found. Most believed that the prisoner was killed by the restless, evil spirit of the 19th century prisoner seen walking the corridors. Adding to the mystery was when the guards lined up the convicts for daily count. uh, there were one too many convicts, in the lineup. And at the end of the row appeared the recently strangled convict. As the guards counted down and went into stunned silence, the ghostly figure then vanished. Today's visitors and staff often report cold spots within the hallways of D Block and intense feelings in cells 12 and 14D, the most active areas. 14D is reported to be almost 20 degrees colder than any other cells on the block. And it is said that psychics have claimed to have felt emotionally charged impressions where the punished prisoners were known to have suffered. These cells are so bad that it is said some refuse to even go in there alone. And we're talking guards. Alcatraz has earned its reputation. And indeed, when the authors of the book Haunted Houses made a trip to Alcatraz, they said that when they entered the cell 14D with a park ranger, they all felt strong vibrations and tinglings in their hands and arms. Convinced that someone or something was there with them, Osborne said she had never felt so much psychic energy in one spot. And it seems that they saw a small man with a shaved head who spoke of being beaten, having his legs broken by the guards, and being cast into solitary confinement. Only that man was long dead. On another occasion, a rather renowned American ghost hunter, Richard Sennett, who apparently is also a psychic. So great, 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 great. Hey, DTN, welcome. He locked himself inside cell 12D, where this evil spirit is said to be. And as the steel door closed, he said he felt icy fingers wrap around his neck, and he experienced visions of twisted and dismembered men. In Stellbox C, many believe that the utility passageway where the convicts Bernard Coy and Joseph Kretzer and Marvin Hubbard were killed during their escape attempt in 1946 is haunted. Loud clanging noises are often heard, but stop if the door is opened, only to resume once it's closed. Others reported seeing the apparitions of men wearing fatigues and hearing disembodied voices at the riot site that left the three prisoners deceased. The laundry room in cell block C is also said to hold an unseen presence. And when a news team went in with the celebrity psychic Sylvia Brown and an ex convict, Leon Thompson, Sylvia encountered the unseen presence and strong impressions of violence in the laundry room. She described a tall man with a bald head and small beady eyes. The ex-convict moved forward stating, "I remember Butcher. He was a hitman with uh, a group before they caught him. His name was A.B. Maldovitz, but we called him Butcher. Another prisoner killed him here in the laundry room." Prison records confirmed that another inmate in the laundry area killed Maldowitz. So it seems that what she saw was, in fact, confirmed by an ex prisoner. They say that people have often heard voices and screams of inmates in the old hospital ward, uh, where they were often secured to a table until they calmed down. Voices are also heard in the old mess hall. When Al Capone himself was imprisoned at Alcatraz, he was assigned a cell on the outer west end of cell block B, and though the gangster was never allowed a musical instrument or radio, many reported the sound of a banjo being strummed within his cell. In 1992, there was uh, a movie done about Alcatraz, and several of the service staff confirmed the prison's haunted history, uh, telling of crashing sounds, running footsteps, unearthly screams, cell doors that closed on their own accord, chains rattling, and the terrible feeling of being watched. Um, and it seems that Alcatraz had enough horror to it that even the living sometimes went completely mad. Uh, it's absolutely an interesting place, and there's an interesting story that somebody added to uh, where I got my information on Alcatraz. He says, myself and my daughter and her colleague friend or college friend toured Alcatraz in July, and they took a photo um, of a vehicle that was uh, in Alcatraz there that's been there for ages and ages and ages. And when they developed the picture, they discovered um, that there was a lady sitting in the truck that was not there to their sight. Um, and they say, I know this because I love classic cars and trucks and was looking at it and wanted to take a photo myself. Uh, there was absolutely no way anybody was in it, and yet when we developed the photo, which was taken while I stood and watched, um, there was a person sitting inside. It certainly uh, gave us quite the shaking. Don't know, what do you think? Do you think that Alcatraz is that haunted? At least we have sufficient proof that ghosts can be photographed, so it is not unreasonable to assume that this too uh, was in fact a photo of a ghost. Why not? Now, of course, there are a number of interesting places around um, in California that are not as populous as the main sort of living areas and more. Um, and in fact, the Borax town, um, which is called Calico, a lovely name, uh, which is ironically perhaps a ghost town. Hey W, welcome, welcome. What do you think? Uh, Alcatraz, the great prison, haunted or not? But as we are talking about Calico, in its day it was pretty good for mining borax, but the borax ran out and now it is a ghost town, empty with only ruined buildings, as populous as it was in the time when it was um, important, and indeed after borax was discovered, silver was also. So it gained a pretty serious population there. with all kinds of important buildings and more, and it became one of the richest areas in the state, producing uh, 86 million in silver and 45 million in borax, which maybe today something was wrong. Oh no, what is wrong, W? Do tell us. Is everything all right? Let us know, please. It became empty, and eventually it died as a town. But in the town, there are a number of graves of people that uh, died there, some of them quite violently, and they are the only residents left for um, the town. The ghosts themselves. Uh, a sad situation, if you will. Um, but John and Lucy Lane, uh, two of the residents that were once there in good times, alas, uh, only remain as ghosts. There is also Lucy Bell King Lane, a woman that lived nearly 70 years of her life there, that is also um, said to haunt the place. She moved there when she was 10 with her parents, two brothers and a sister, um, to Bismarck, the little town overlooking Calico. And to get to school, she would have to go down a steep slope in the mornings and make a long, tiring hike up afterwards. When she was 18, she married John Robert Lane, and they opened the general store that provided provisions um, to varying residents. When the town started to uh, die off, of course, things did not go so well. John died in 1934, but Lucy lived on, staying in the same house until she died at the age of 93 in 1967. And today, the house is a museum, which, as we know, is also a good way to get ghosts. Thank you very much. Um, but it seems that they never left, and she has been seen walking between the old store and the home that she lived in until she died, wearing a long black dress, the very lace that um, she was buried in. Her favorite rocking chair occasionally has been seen to rock of its own accord, and sometimes the pictures on the wall are found the next morning, taken down and piled in a neat pile on the floor. The old store, the clerks there have heard inexplicable noises and seen movements that everybody knows nowadays uh, absolutely has to have been uh, Lucy herself. But she's not alone. There's a little 10 or 12-year-old girl that's been wandering around, often smiling through a window, which brings us back to one of our questions still not answered, so please do give your opinions, I beg of you. Can ghosts pass through glass? We have not yet had an answer. There are teachers and another small child seen in the old schoolroom. Um, and they've been known to grab at people's legs or pinch ankles. Uh, inside the school, sometimes a floating red light has been seen as well. The most incredible story is one that two British tourists reported um, having an extended visit with a staff person in period costume who explained to them that she was the last teacher in Calico. They were ready to leave and they had pictures taken with themselves and the teacher um, who guided them around. And it turns out it was indeed a teacher. The last schoolmistress in Calico was Margaret Oliver, who died in 1932 and is buried in the cemetery. When they got their pictures developed, they were amazed to find that the staff member they were photographed with did not appear in the photographs at all. And there were no staff members working at the schoolhouse during their visit. But when they managed to find a picture of Margaret Olivier, they discovered they knew exactly who she was. So it seems that even the ghosts are hospitable in Calico. So yeah, and of course you had a mine, and there are things in the depths of the mine, and well, there are cold spots, feelings of your hair standing on end, and there's a space where the Mulcahy brothers, Mulcahy? I think I said it right. Two of the miners made their home there in the mines, and they say that, in fact, those two brothers are still there now and occasionally have been seen wandering around. Uh, Near Maggie's mine is Hank's Hotel, that once belonged to an angry old cowboy whose spirit allegedly once punched a man in the leg who was standing on his fence. More commonly, people have reported something pulling at their wrists or hands or clothing along the boardwalk in front of the hotel, and they reckon that this is a 4 or 5 year old child that has been seen wandering around, no matter what. There have been people who've seen a big man with a white beard that fits the description of the man that kept the peace there for quite a long time. Tumbleweed Harris, its last marshal, deceased but not gone. These kind of things keep going on. We have a lady in a long white dress, another white lady seen walking the outskirts. Um, and a ghost named Esmeralda has taken up residence in the town theatre, which is now a fossils and minerals shop. But not only that, Dorsey the mail-carrying dog. In 1883, Postmaster Jim Stacy found Dorsey lying on his porch, and this black and white shepherd was hungry and footsore, and so Stacy adopted him, and he would help by carrying the mail. And needing to get an important message to the mine one day, he tied a note to Dorsey's neck, sent him up there, and Dorsey returned with a reply. And seeing as this worked, he became one of the regular mail carriers. Um, and this was a thing. And he became so valuable that Stacy was offered $500, which was an absolute fortune at the time. And Stacy refused. So this went on, but he ain't gone either. Dorsey has been seen as a shadow-like apparition at the cemetery and near the print shop that stands where the original post office was. So it seems that there's a lot of great old people in this town, and, well, it just so happens that some of them are dead. But that doesn't stop them being great old people, and even quite nice in many ways. But tell me what you think. Would you go and spend a night there? Would you like to pet a ghost dog? I think I rather would. But welcome, Silent Potato, and no one. Glad you could join. And yeah, give your comments. Let me know if you would like to join the live. You would be welcome. And tell us more about your thoughts as we move along to the Queen Mary, a wonderful, wonderful ship now parked in Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary, a colossal ship that was bigger, faster, and more powerful than the Titanic, 1,000 feet long, and was first laid and built in 1930 in Clyde, in Scotland. There you go. Her construction was held up a little, um, owing to the Great Depression, but she made her maiden voyage on May 27, 1936. For 3 years, it was the luxury liner, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, David Niven, Mary Pickford, George and Ewa Gershwin, Sir Winston Churchill, and more graced her decks, and she held the record for the fastest ever North Atlantic crossing. An amazing ship. But World War II broke out and luxury travel stopped. And she was made into a troop ship, ironically called the Grey Ghost. By the end of World War II, the ship had carried more than 800,000 troops and traveled more than 600,000 miles and played a significant role in virtually every major Allied campaign. She had survived a collision at sea and had the record for carrying the most people in a floating vessel, that's 16,683, and had participated in the D-Day invasion. Now, as you can imagine, with all of that, well, you got to expect at least one ghost. So let's see what she has to offer. After 1,001 successful Atlantic crossings, in 1967 she was permanently docked at Long Beach, California, and she became the luxury hotel that she is today. She is a historic floating hotel and museum which has a great many visitors, but not all of them are alive. There are as many as 150 known spirits that have been spotted on the decks in the last 60 years. It has been the site of at least 49 deaths as well, besides the terrors of war. So, well, right there. The engine room is located 50 feet below water level, and that's where the most paranormal activity is. The infamous Door 13 crushed at least 2 men to death at different points during the ship's history. During a routine watertight door drill in 1966, the most recent death crushed an 18-year-old crew member dressed in blue coveralls and sporting a beard. And he's been seen there quite often, very recognizable. The first and second class swimming pools are two more popular spots for ghosts, and though neither is utilized today for their original purpose, the ghosts seem not aware of that. And while the pool is emptied and dry, women in 1930s swimming suits have been seen wandering the decks and swimming, and the sounds of splashing and wet footprints have been spied leading to the changing rooms, and a young girl with a teddy bear has been seen playing by the pools. In the second class pool room, the spirit of another little girl called Jackie has been seen. Allegedly, the unfortunate girl drowned during its sailing days and refused to move on, and her voice and laughter are still heard there. So, why? We're not sure. In the Queen's Salon, though, which is the first class lounge. A beautiful young woman in an elegant white evening gown has been seen dancing alone in the shadows of the corner of the room. Uh, in several of the first class staterooms, there is a tall, dark haired man in a 1930s suit, as well as water just starts running from the taps, lights turn on and off, phones ring with nobody at the other end of the line, and the third class children's playroom has heard a baby's cry, which uh, is thought to be an infant boy that died shortly after his birth on board the ship. It is said as well, because why not? Um, distinct knocks, doors slamming, high pitched squeals, drastic temperature changes, and aromas and smells long past have been encountered. Strange events and quite a few apparitions throughout this hotel. So, yeah, if you want to have a 5-star visit and a stay in a hotel, that still is one of the best. But don't mind sharing a little. You know where to dock yourself. The next interesting place in California is the haunted Drum Barracks. Not many people realize that California was part of the Civil War, and it certainly was. And the Drum Barracks played an important role in the conflict. Originally, the Drum Barracks, which is a 5-company post, was established in 1862 and was called Camp San Pedro. In 1863, it was changed to Camp Drum in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Richard Drum, Assistant Adjutant General of the Department of California, and it soon became known as Drum Barracks. At the time, the government was unsure whether California would declare itself for the North or the South, as it was equally divided in its sympathies. And the southern half of the state, especially around Los Angeles, was in procession, leading to the government to determine that it may need a presence in the area just in case things went dodgy. Um, it was a very defensible place, as you can imagine, being well built. Um, and this is because it was originally built to fight the Indians, but there weren't any Indians to fight in the area, so spending more than $1 million to build, um, that was a hell of a lot for the time. And it could house some 500 soldiers and stable up to 300 horses. Uh, and it had all the relevant buildings required, as you can expect for a military camp. Now, they decided in the end to join the Union, and of course, this resulted in taking a side, and war broke out. And as we know, the Union won, which was great. The hospital had a lot of people in it. That was the military hospital on the base. And was one of the best around, saving lives and doing a great deal. They went through war, it went through fires. It was restored a few times, and it's still used today for reenactions and more. But if the history alone is not exciting enough, the paranormal will add to that. Uh, Inexplicable noises, the sound of chains being dragged, footsteps throughout the building when no one is present. Um, there is a woman that they call Maria appearing in a hoop skirt and smelling strongly of lavender and violet perfume. Uh, a man dressed in an 1800s officer's uniform who smokes a pipe is seen, and sometimes just the pipe smoke is smelled. The most active room is the model room, where people have encountered perfume and tobacco, have seen and heard of items moving around and footsteps approaching them from behind. It seems that, as busy as it was in its day, it is no less busy even now. Moving along to the haunted Rialto Theatre in South Pasadena, an icon of the long-standing Route 66. It closed its doors after 81 years, shutting out all the living customers, but not the dead. The historic theatre was built in 1924 in a Spanish Baroque design with Egyptian touches, seating 1,200 people, and included uh, terry dressing rooms, a scenic loft, an orchestra pit, and a deep stage. The decor featured pictured tiles, colorful stenciling, and plaster ornaments. Uh, Quite a wonderful place indeed. So, for 30 cents, you could go and see a great deal. Um, and it lasted even through the Great Depression, which is kind of nice. But eventually it closed its doors, but there was no real way to keep things going, and things got sold off. Um, but they kept it restored. And in 1975, the classic Rocky Horror Picture Show came out and did a 3-decade run at the old theater, showing every Saturday night at midnight for years. Um, but eventually, even that uh, had to end, alas. And so it closed down to accept to special concerts and what have you. It survived the death of vaudeville, 2 fires, threats of demolition and conversion into a parking lot. Um, but in 2007, it finally closed for good. It is, however, a historic place, and so it is kept for now. Nevertheless, what else is there? Stories include a young girl who allegedly slit her wrists in the bathroom before making her way to the balcony and bleeding to death. A man who went insane in the projector booth. And staff and visitors say that the stalls in the girls' bathroom have started shaking of their own accord. In the theatre itself, the apparition of an older man is often seen sitting in various seats and walking up and down the balcony, which could have been the man who went mad in the projector booth. There is a cat, a black cat, that roams the old movie house and can be felt brushing past your legs or walking in front of the screen. Uh, it seems that when it does move in front of the screen, it produces an eerie red light that glows. A dark figure has been seen gliding down off the stage and making his way to the theatre seats before disappearing as he enters the lobby. Um, there have been a whole lot of paranormal events, such as abnormalities in photographs, uneasy feelings in varying places, and whispers being heard. At, excuse me. At the end of the day, it's haunted, and you can go and see it too. The next interesting place that you can go and see is the Bella Magia Hotel. Um, in Ventura, California, and it is a place where an infamous prostitute named Sylvia was found hanging in her room. It is now, of course, a B&B, and you can visit it. Leafing through the book, you will find all kinds of comments where people have recorded meeting up with Sylvia, and it seems that male guests have often found that when they walked into their room, they could smell rose perfume, which of course was her signature greeting for the gentleman. It is a wonderful place to be, but as one person recounts, they were relaxing on a Sunday in the living room with a warm fire and enjoying a book when suddenly they realized there was something to their left. It felt like the air was being sucked from the room. I had no reason to logically feel this and looked around thinking something awful was about to happen. And the sickeningly sweet smell of rose perfume permeated the air. It was quite suffocating. I was so scared that I grabbed my long coat and ran down the hallway to the front desk. The young man working there could see how frightened I was, and he understood about Sylvia, and he walked me back up to my room. But outside Sylvia's old room, the light started to flicker, and as we walked down the hall, all the lights near the guest rooms began to blink. The man said that he had just done a light check for his shift, so it certainly wasn't electrical. When we arrived at my room, I asked that he come in with me, and he said that he too could smell the perfume. And as the door opened, they propped it so it could not shut, and two more guests going to breakfast stopped and commented on the smell of rose perfume. And next we knew it, we had four people standing outside looking into the room. One man who said that he stayed often at the inn said that he had had a visit from Sylvia the previous Saturday night, and she had taken his wallet and put it in a different part of the room. So it seems that this ghost is really quite strong and can appear during the day as well, which answers one of our questions about ghosts. Yes, ghosts haunt the day too. Um, he did say, however, that this was a usual trick played by Sylvia and to pay it no mind. Um, the storyteller went into their room to find their husband still fast asleep there, never having awakened. Um, and typical to husbands, had completely missed the visit of Sylvia, the dead prostitute. I bet that caused a family argument, at least briefly. Now, of course, La Llorona is Spanish for weeping woman and is a woman in white, a tall, thin spirit with natural beauty, long, flowing black hair in a white ground, and particularly roaming the rivers and creeks, waiting the night uh, and screaming, searching for children to drag to a watery grave. Now, where did this story come from? Well, I'm not sure. She's often said to come from the story of Maria, born to a peasant family in a humble village, her beauty catching the attention of all men in the area, and she would don her best white gown in the evenings, and men would be thrilled to see her at the local fandangos, and many waited to see her, and she loved the attention. However, she had two small sons that often kept her from going out too much, so she would leave them alone. And one day, the two boys were found drowned in the river. Some say they drowned through her neglect, others say she killed them. But they say that she was a caring woman, full of life and love. Um, but alas, when the children died, um, it was just too much. Now, there's lots of stories about how this person became a ghost and who she might be, but we know from going around and looking at all of our lives and more that, in fact, a great number of these same kind of ghosts have been seen in a number of different areas. Um, so perhaps the legends don't always agree, um, but nevertheless, the ghost appears repeatedly and is always very, very tragic. Now, as we progress, we cannot only talk of the ghosts alone, we must mention the ghosts and the witches of Seville in California, Las Brujas. Now, Seville, interestingly enough, we generally think of it as an orange. But in fact, Seville is most known for cotton and grapes. The town is near Sequoia National Park. It is not big, um, but it is what it is. And the story that they speak of uh, was told by somebody that went there as a migrant worker and stayed. But when they arrived, they were told by several local families that besides the other migrant workers, um, there were several local witches. These witches would appear at the first full moon of the month to fight with each other to see who had the most power. On the night of the full moon, we could often hear our neighbors, they say, the vecinos, talking about the witches. And eventually we joined in with them. And we kind of expected to see ugly women fighting, which I suppose is fair enough. But as they waited and watched, suddenly two balls of fire appeared in the sky. Uh, Watching, they saw them bouncing back and forth across the sky, often colliding with each other. They continued to do battle until one puffed out, and then finally the other moved off. And the neighbors said these were the riches uh, fighting there. And they were not the only people to say that they had seen these things. So were they witches? Were they ghosts? Who's to say? But they were terrifying and entirely unexpected. Now, the next interesting is not a railway station, but in fact, older still, a stage station, which was built around 1851. Uh, Historic, fascinating, and haunted. Now, on the west side of the Colorado Desert, the name Vallecito means little valley, which date back to the um, Spaniard exploration of the land. The valley, with its natural springs and grasslands, um, is quite a welcome relief after crossing the great desert that is there in what is called the Journey of Death. Originally, the valley was Indian land and it was called Hawi. And it was only in 1781 that the first European got there, which was Captain Pedro Fages. Um, the only road through into Southern California was this road. And during the gold rush, thousands of prospectors passed through Vallecito as they went along to look for gold. And it built up and became more. And eventually, it became the town of Seville. Now, like numerous places in the Old West, this stage station was witness to murder, robberies, and all kinds of human miseries. And it is said that the station is haunted by those who met their death there. There is the White Horse of Vallecito that began with a stage robbery. And when the stage was traveling to the Vallecito station, four men on horseback held it up and they took $65,000 and fled. But as they fled, the stage driver fired one shot, hitting one of the bandits. Once the rest were gone, he approached the man he had shot and found not one but two dead bandits. So it seems that the gang leader had shot uh, the other bandit to keep a significant part of the loot for himself. The last two remaining bandits rode to Vallecito station and buried their ill-gotten gains along the way. They stopped for food and drink, and while they're there, began to argue. And according to the tale, the bandit leader excused himself momentarily, and as he uh, left, he said he would be back in a moment. He did come back on his big white stallion and shot the other bandit, and the wounded man returned fire, and the leader fell dead from his horse. The white horse bolted through the doors and into the hills, and it is said that the white horse's ghost continues to roam the hills near there, appearing around midnight out of nowhere, galloping past and disappearing again. Two ghosts lurk around the old stage. Excuse me. Around the old stage station where they are the two Texan immigrants named Buck and Roland, who were allegedly killed in a duel with each other. In the Carrizo Wash area, the Phantom stagecoach has been spied many times, pulled by four mules and carrying no passengers, just driven by a spectral figure. According to legend, the stage traveled from El Paso in Texas to San Diego with a box of gold coins in 1860. In addition, the driver of the stage carried a guard to protect the money. But when they reached Yuma, Arizona, the guard fell ill, and the driver continued without him. And somewhere in the area of the Carrizo Wash, between the Fish and Coyote Mountains, it was held up by bandits who killed the driver and fled. The stage and the driver continue uh, riding their route ever since on moonlit nights, pausing at the Carrizo station before continuing on its way. And the prints of horses and wagon wheels can be seen the next day. The most famous ghost is a white lady, unsurprisingly, the White Lady of Vallecito. And she arrived on the Butterfield stage, but had taken ill sometime in the late 1850s and had to be carried to the station. She was on her way back to Sacramento when our fiancé struck it rich in the Sierra goldfields. Young and frail, Eileen O'Connor was taken to a bed in the back of the station and cared for 2 days. But despite best attempts, she died. And when the station staff went through her trunk, they found her white wedding dress, in which they buried her in an unmarked grave. But she was not ready to go, and almost immediately she was seen pacing around the old station site, waiting for the stage to take her to Sacramento. Her grave and two others are now there, near in a now built up cemetery, and her ghost is often seen. There are also the strange balls of light seen on Oriflamme Mountain, north of the station, uh, ghost lights that bob over the slopes. Um, First recorded in 1858 by a stage driver, but more came in reporting seeing the same soldiers, prospectors, and explorers. And it seems that they are strong enough and bright enough that they light the sky like fireworks. So, if you're interested in ghosts and more, there's quite a lot out in California. But now we must think about taking a brief jump from the ghosts and have a look at one or two of the cryptids that apparently are seen. And we have a Loch Ness Monsters type creature, Tahoe Tessie, the Fresno Nightcrawler, the Dark Watchers, and the Borrego Sandman. And what are these creatures and what can we learn about them? So let us begin. Uh, Now, I don't know how much you know about stories that have been said um, over the years of different uh, possible places that might exist, which many say are rubbish, but, well, many say are not. So, there was a place that's supposed to have been a land much like Atlantis that um, may or may not exist. And one of these stories is Lemuria, which was said to be in the center of the earth. And this 124-year-old legend says that descendants of the Lemurians live in an elaborate tunnel system beneath Mount Shasta and are seen occasionally on the surface in their white robes. Um, is there anything like that? Well, we're not sure. Now, the next one is interesting. It is that a story of things going back 300 years, uh, called locally as Los Vigilantes Oscuros, the Dark Watchers. They are said to stalk travelers between Santa Lucia Mountains of Big Fir. Um, they are described as 7 to 10 foot tall, shadowy, and clad in dark cloaks and hats with burning red eyes. And of course, this fits exactly to another cryptid we have encountered in a great many cultures and countries, that of the jinn. So it seems that the jinn are back again, not called as such, of course, but described exactly the same, living in exactly the same kind of environment, which is to say, a desolate place where they can be left alone. Um, and as we know, the jinn are not spirits as such and are not ghosts either. They are another race, just not human, that live only partially in this plane of existence. And it seems we have a whole lot more of them in an ideal place for them right there in California. Tahoe Tessie is basically the Loch Ness monster of Lake Tahoe. A 30 to 60 foot lake monster described exactly the same as Nessie. Some say that she is a prehistoric animal or possibly an undiscovered species. Skeptics say that no, she, at best she is a giant sturgeon, that has been misidentified. But we don't really know, do we? The Fresno Nightcrawler is actually a new one. I suppose every legend has to start somewhere. And in this case, it began with, in 2007, a video captured by a resident of two creatures walking through his front yard. The same beings were captured again in video by somebody else in Yosemite. The Nightcrawler is almost cartoonish in appearance. It looks like a pair of wide leg pants with no torso, stumbling around like a drunk college student. Some say it's extraterrestrial. Um, some say it's a ghost of someone that was cut in half, but others think it's a hoax. Now, these are not the only things to be scared of. We have in other places encountered skinwalkers, cannibalistic creatures that may or may not be witches. Um, these are the ones from Joshua Tree, the most dangerous and feared inhabitants of the Mojave Desert. Uh, Shapeshifters that can cast spells and imitate the voices of people you know. Um, these are absolutely terrifying creatures that we've covered in a number of other places, and they will eat you. Another interesting one is they say that there are giants, or at least the remains of giants, who average around 8 foot tall that were found mummified under the uh, desert in Death Valley. Is it true? Well, things of the same nature have been said to be found in a great many places, that giants have been seen in a number of countries and cultures, so maybe it is. The next interesting person we all know very well indeed, and Bigfoot is back, this time referred to as Yucca Man. He is a large, hairy, bipedal creature, first sighted in 29 Palms in 1971. But numerous sightings have been seen in Joshua Tree, Antelope Valley, the Sierra Nevada mountains, and more. And he is exactly the Bigfoot we know and love, which basically say he's here. And if that wasn't enough, there is the Borrego Sandman, and he is quite literally a Bigfoot, but with lighter fur and a more humanoid face, and he hangs out in the Anza Borrego Desert. So they have two kinds of Bigfoot in Cali. They also, of course, have the Chupacabra, which we well know and are not surprised to see that. And they've been seen all over the place. Um, though, of course, lots of people are skeptical. But nevertheless, we have these creatures. And with that, we conclude our ghostly runaround of California. And we are going to take our leave of ghosts and cryptids for a bit and move on to other supernatural and paranormal entities and things to discuss from cultures and countries around the world, because we've pretty much done everywhere, which has been rather exciting and most interesting. And I do hope you have enjoyed it. If there's anything you feel I've missed on ghosts and cryptids, uh, do ask and I will do more. Absolutely, I think it would be a fascinating topic to revisit. But we have more topics to explore and will do. So until then, I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. And we are going to do so much more. So for the now, I shall bid you good night. Sleep deep, sleep sweet, but sleep with one eye open, and maybe keep that holy object near at hand, because you never know. Those things that go bump in the night might very possibly go bump for you.